Okay, good evening, everybody who is here. My name is Laura Dwyer. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Public Educator and Information Coordinator for the CRMC. And tonight, Leah Feldman and I will be walking you through the Coastal Hazard Application worksheet and viewer. So Leah is our Coastal Policy Analyst, for those of you who don't know Leah. And you'll probably be seeing a little bit more of her in the coming months as we really push the CHA forward into the municipal realm. So we also have Teresa Crean from the town of Barrington here. In case there are any additional questions from folks that we can't answer, Teresa was instrumental in designing the CHA worksheet and viewer along with others. And that was for in her role as Coastal Resources Center, URI, Rhode Island Sea Grant, and now she works for the town of Barrington. So we're happy to have her here. And so without further ado, I guess, Leah, I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. Hi, everybody. My name is Leah Feldman. As Laura said, I am a Coastal Policy Analyst working for the CRMC. I am here to talk to you a little bit and provide an instructional walkthrough of the coastal hazard application process for municipal project review. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Cool. You guys all seeing that okay? Great. All right. So yeah, so coastal hazard application. The coastal hazard application worksheet and online viewer was developed as part of the CRMC's Rhode Island Shoreline Change SAMP, also known as the Beach SAMP. And SAMP stands for Special Area Management Plan. We'll get into that quite a bit today. So the worksheet and the online viewer provide guidance for property owners to address coastal hazards for certain projects in the design and permitting process when applying to CRMC for proposed activities in the coastal zone. Chapter 5 of the aforementioned Beach SAMP, which you see in front of you, gives some additional background information for this application process. It's really designed to help educate property owners on the risks that they inherit when building or performing other activities in a coastal area. So we really want you as municipalities to use the coastal hazard application. Legislation was passed by the General Assembly in 2021, encouraging municipalities to utilize the coastal hazard application in their local permitting processes. And the CRMC wants to ensure that every single one of Rhode Island's 21 coastal communities are comfortable with both the worksheet and the viewer app. So they can properly incorporate both tools into their everyday operations. So this legislation enables these coastal communities to adopt the coastal hazard application process as part of their existing overlay districts in order to better assess coastal hazard risk for applicants seeking building permits. So why bother using the coastal hazard application? The coastal hazard application and online map viewer provide guidance for property owners to address coastal hazards and better plan for the future. The goal of the CHA is how it's sometimes referred to, coastal hazard application. The goal of the CHA process is to ensure that CRMC approved projects are designed and built with the applicant's full acknowledgement of the risks of building in a coastal hazard area. These areas are exposed to storm surge and erosion and potential future sea level rise conditions. This process is aimed to help protect public health, safety, and welfare, minimize damage and losses to nearby properties and infrastructure, and just generally reduce overall impacts to coastal resources. Adapting to these ongoing and future conditions will ensure that our state continues to build resilient communities and strong coastal economies and environments. So this slide is really important. It sort of outlines what the legislation means for municipalities. So in the general laws that I spoke of earlier in the state of Rhode Island, the term building height is defined very specifically. So building height is defined as measured from the average existing grade elevation where the foundation of the structure is proposed. So for an existing structure, building height has to be measured from the average grade taken from the outermost four corners of the foundation. And then also up to the highest point of the existing or proposed roof or structure, or whatever the highest point of the proposed structure is. So within this definition, there's a provision, however, that states that for any property or structure located in what's referred to as a special flood hazard area, which is shown on the FEMA flood insurance rate maps, that are also sometimes referred to as firm maps. I might use that term moving forward, or depicted on the CRMC suggested design elevation with 3-foot sea level rise map as being inundated during a 100-year storm. So anything that meets either of those criteria are considered special flood hazard areas. The following is excluded from calculating that building height. Either the base flood elevation on the FEMA firm map or the flood insurance rate maps plus up to 5 feet. So whatever the firm map says, plus 5 feet of any utilized or proposed freeboard, minus just the existing average elevation, or the suggested design elevation as depicted on the CRMC Storm Tools design elevation, 3 sea level rise. So adding 3 feet of sea level rise during a 100-year storm, less the, again, minus the averaging existing grade elevation. That's really complicated to say out loud, makes a lot more sense on paper, I promise. And our coastal hazard application walks you through the entire process. So that's sort of what we're here to do, is sort of unpack some of these complicated terms and laws in order to make it easier to onboard to a municipality or coastal community. So what this generally means, all of it, this whole law means, is that the laws that regulate how high you can build your building include allowances for increased height due to flood risk preparation. So you won't be penalized for any reason for trying to onboard some of these preventative measures. It's there to help alleviate any possible permitting issues that might come from incorporating FEMA or CRMC suggested elevation changes to your structure. So this complicated law, it's there to help you. It's there to help us. So what made the CRMC develop this coastal hazard application process? The CRMC is mandated by the federal government to uphold all applicable sections of the Coastal Zone Management Act of 1972, which requires that the CRMC and any state coastal management agency provide for the protection of the natural resources within the coastal zone. So the CRMC is obligated to develop management plans that give consideration to all of the various things that we value in the coast, like the ecological, cultural, historic, and aesthetic values, as well as needs for compatible economic development. We have to ensure that that's taken into consideration as well. So the coastal hazard application is a tool that is meant to meet that mandate. It's a really effective tool for balancing interests. So the coastal hazard application helps to incorporate risk identification and awareness within the design and development stages of projects. So how do you know if you and your project need to complete the coastal hazard worksheet? There are a couple things to consider. If you're applying for a CRMC permit for any reason at all, you will probably need to consider a coastal hazard application in most cases, but you must use a coastal hazard application if your project fits into one of these listed categories. Some examples are construction of a new residential building, as defined in our Red Book, construction of any new beach pavilions, construction of any new private or public roadways, constructions of new infrastructure. And additionally, for any and all projects, it's always important to consult the Red Book for more information on what your application needs. It's really a great way to ensure that your application goes through as quickly as possible. If applications are missing pieces or they are not fully prepared, it takes much, much longer. So if you send an application that does need a coastal hazard application assigned to it, and you don't have one, it will just take even longer. So always consult the Red Book for any and all applications. There are specific regulatory requirements for the coastal hazard analysis application that can be found in section 1.1.6I of the Red Book. You can also look to chapter 5 of the Shoreline Change Special Area Management Plan, the Beach SAMP I talked about earlier. All of these resources can be found on the CRMC website, and they will help give you an additional background on the CHA and its uses and some guidance on how to use it. All right, now we're getting to the good stuff, how to actually use the coastal hazard application worksheet. I want to preface this section by saying that today's webinar is primarily an overview of the tool. So we're going to go through the steps of the coastal hazard analysis from a really bird's eye view, but like many other interfaces such as these, questions, clarifications, confusion might come up as the tool is being used. So this presentation really is just a first step. Laura Dwyer and myself, we are more than happy to provide farther in-depth training to municipalities on using this tool and making sure it's being onboarded in the best way possible. So you can reach out to me or Laura anytime to come up with a time or a plan to help us walk you through this in a more one-on-one basis. So I'm providing an overarching view. This webinar is going to be recorded. It will be on our website. But if you need a little bit more handholding, we are definitely here for that too. We want to ensure full comprehension and accessibility to anyone who wants it. Okay, we are off. Step one. So the first thing about the coastal hazard application worksheet is that it will ask you about your project design life. So in this step, the applicant would choose a projected design life or lifespan for their project and then identify a projected sea level rise for the project site to incorporate exposure to coastal flood. So first, you provide the first floor elevation or FFE, or the elevation of the lowest horizontal structural section. This is for projects in FEMA Area V or Coastal A zone. More on that later. Next up, you want to choose how long you envision your project lasting. So the CRMC suggests using a 30-year minimum for most projects. So at minimum, your project will probably, at least be around for 30 years. So once you have your design life in mind, you add your design life to the current year, and then you check off the sea level rise projection closest to your design life year, as you can see on the right side of the page there. Okay, next up is site assessment. This part allows the applicant to review available maps and tools in order to assess the exposure and potential risk from coastal hazards at the project site. So this step uses yet another tool that the CRMC created with help from a bunch of partners called Storm Tools. And you can use something that's linked right here, which is called Storm Tools for Beginners. And this is an ArcGIS map available, again, on the CRMC website. So using this map, you can enter your project site address in the upper right-hand corner. It's pretty small on the screen, but I blew up the magnifying glass icon. That's what you're looking for. That's where you put your address in. So once you have entered in your address, you're going to use the sea level rise value that we calculated back in step 1. You're going to click the show the contents of the map, a little link button on the left side panel, and then select the sea level rise map layer closest to your sea level rise value from step 1. So you're going to find the number that's closest. If you don't have an exact value, we recommend rounding up to the higher sea level rise map layer. Simply safer that way. Great. All right, so using the Storm Tools sea level rise map layer, you can select yes or no, is your project exposed to future tidal inundation? So you just click yes or no on your worksheet. Next up, in order to identify roads that connect to your project site and see whether they also show exposure to sea level rise, you can change the base map layer on Storm Tools to the option that says streets, so you can see a good overlay of where the streets are. And then zoom out to see if any of the roads leading to or from the project site are going to be exposed. So next, you'll determine your recommended storm tools design elevation using the step 3 map found on the Coastal Hazard Viewer webpage. So you just click the map on your desired location to enable a pop-up box that will show you the storm tools design elevation for both the 100-year storm and the sea level rise scenario that you've chosen. So for the storm tools design elevation step, we recommend sort of coordinating with your design engineer if you have one on this. It can be a little bit complicated. An important note that I myself encountered quite a bit when working through this, when you are using storm tools and you are filling in the worksheet, if you need to get away from storm tools, like if you need to click something within storm tools that opens up a new link, definitely right click on it and open it in a new tab. You run the risk of losing all your work on the worksheet if you just click through it. So just word to the wise, open a new tab. Don't lose your work. All right, so next up we have shoreline change. So the CRMC shoreline change maps come with a lot of really great information, one of which is the transects. So you want to use the shoreline change map to indicate the transects that closest match to your location and what the erosion rate there is. All of that information can be found on the shoreline change maps, again, on the CRMC website. So select the projected erosion rate corresponding to your design life. So if you're on the 30-year track, you just add that to the current year and you'll see your future erosion multiplier, and then complete those calculations as shown to see what your erosion setback would be. Okay, yet another CRMC tool. We are moving on to the Coastal Environmental Risk Index, or CERI. CERI was made using state-of-the-art modeling tools to predict storm surge and waves. So combined with the shoreline change maps and the damage functions, all of that is put together to construct a coastal environmental risk index. We are able to do this using access to the state emergency database, which gives us information on the characteristics of the structures in the area and the ability to perform analysis for individual structures around the state. So on the Coastal Hazard Analysis Viewer, application viewer, you can find tab 5A, and there's a link there that will take you to CERI, and you can check the level of projected damage to your location as indicated on the map that is corresponding to the design life found way back in step 1. For big projects, for large projects and subdivisions only. So if you have a single family home or a smaller structure, this wouldn't apply to you. But if you have a bigger subdivision or a really large project, you would want to refer to CRMC Red Book section 1.1.61F to access our SLAM models, and those are sea level affecting marshes models. So the CRMC recommends consulting the SLAM maps to assess potential impacts to, again, large projects and subdivisions from salt marsh migration, from projecting sea level rise. So as sea level rises, salt marshes are projected to migrate inland, and these maps will show you exactly where those might be. And for these big projects, it is recommended that you take that projection into consideration. Again, these can be found on the CRMC website under the map section. The final thing to consider in this area is other forces and factors. So it's really important to just consider what other factors might impact, excuse me. It's allergy season. It's important to consider what other factors could impact development, such as habitats, shoreline features, depth to the water table, public access to the shore, rising subsurface groundwater levels due to sea level rise, and more. So just take a good educated look around and figure out what other factors might impact this development in the future. All right, the last step is design evaluation. So here the applicant identifies, documents, and assesses the feasibility of design techniques that could serve to avoid or minimize risk of losses in the future. So it's really important to be sure that Chapter 7 of the Rhode Island Shoreline Change SAMP or Beach SAMP is used in whatever way it can best be. It's a good guide for this step in particular. This step could be iterative. So project modifications, re-examination of the impacts could come from this design evaluation. It might lead to one or more alternatives for the project sites. So design evaluations can include relocation of the site if the site really doesn't seem right anymore, fortification, and or you might just employ some other alternatives to accommodate the risks that have been identified, coastal hazard impacts. So whatever the alternative is that you choose that might come up from this process should minimize risk from coastal hazards and avoid or minimize impacts to coastal resources. The applicant is encouraged to select whatever alternative that will avoid or minimize the risks to the project, abutting structures, infrastructure, or coastal resources. In all cases, projects must be cited and designed to address all applicable regulatory standards. Lastly, monitoring of design should always be included in successful applications. So we want to be sure that you are taking into consideration how things might change in the future as well. Your last step is to submit. The applicant will submit the completed coastal hazard application along with their signature from their designer or engineer. And then the process starts on our end of reviewing all the information that you've provided. All right, that is all I have for now. We intentionally left a good amount of time for questions. I know that was a lot of information. We will have Teresa Crean joining us, who is one of basically the champion of the coastal hazard application. So she's very well suited to answer any questions you might have about processes or details. And I'll leave this slide up just in case anybody wants me to go back to a specific step or slide. So yeah, that's it for me now. Thanks.
Thanks, Leah. Hey, Teresa. I'm gonna make you co-host. So, all right.
Nicely done. Nicely presented. It's come a long way.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Leah. That was great.
I paused the screen share so we could see each other. If you want me to bring it back up, I always can.
Okay. And Teresa, I got your note in the chat that the town of Barrington would like a training for the Conservation Commission, maybe jointly with the other committee. So I've got you down on the list.
Thank you very much. I presented the concept to the Conservation Commission at the last meeting and they seemed very interested.
Great.
Because they do make land use decisions. They do have, a review capacity.
Okay. All right.
And our building official from Barrington, Dennis Began, is on the line too. And he and I have talked about how we could start to maybe phase this into the municipality, since, CRMC has been using this tool for the last couple of years with its permit staff. But as far as making local land use decisions outside of CRMC's jurisdiction, I think it's, a phased process to apply that locally, to test it and see how successful it could be to educate, permit applicants. Would be an, experiment that we could do. Happy to do, or we could try in Barrington. Dennis and I have to talk about it still, but.
Willing to be the guinea pig at the municipal level. We appreciate that.
Since they passed a legislation back in last July to enable the municipalities to use it, we might as well give it a shot.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, I don't see any questions from anyone, so I guess I will just reiterate what Leah said earlier, that please, I will get the word out to everyone that we invited, but please, all of you who are in attendance, reach out to Leah or myself, and say, I would like to schedule a training. We can do it in person, we can do it virtually. We are also capable of doing the live demo of the process using storm tools and Siri and all the maps that Leah went through. She did screenshots just for ease tonight. So if you prefer something that's live with town specific examples, we are absolutely capable of doing that. All right. And Jeff put in a question here, is a presentation to the round chapter of AIPA something to do also? Sure. Yes.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Yeah. All right. I've got them on my list now. Thank you. All right. Well, if no one else here has questions, I don't see the point in keeping everyone on here past dinner time. So I think we'll wrap up. But thank you, Leah, for walking us through. Teresa, thank you for being here and for offering Barrington up to kind of take this first step forward in actually putting this out to the communities and putting it in their hands. So thank you. And again, like Leah said, this video will be on our website in a day or two, on our YouTube channel as well. And we fully expect that we will be doing this, on a smaller basis, town to town, over the next bunch of months. So we'll be around. So thank you, everybody, and have a good night.